Well, let's ready to roll. I'd like to welcome everybody. Welcome the students that are coming in from West Michigan, throughout West Michigan, and our panelists and our moderator. I'm going to have our three career guides introduce themselves, so I'm not going to do that. For the purpose of for everybody, I'm John, and I'll be kind of the host of the meeting, and I'm with West Michigan Tech Talent. And this is a lot of fun. We had an event on Monday with several schools in the area, and we had 3 different panelists that talked about it. Great questions. So if you're a student, I encourage you to listen, dropping questions into the Q&A, and we'll get to them for sure. My colleague Sadie is on the call, and she'll be monitoring the questions. But with that said, we're going to get started, and we're going to start with introductions, and I'm going to just ask each of the candidates, and I'll start with Joanna, just to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your role at the company you're at, a little bit about kind of a day in the life, or a week in the life, or a month in the life. I know a lot of your projects have different life cycles, but we'll get started that way as the introduction. So we'll start with Joanna.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Nice to meet you, but I'm not really meeting you, and excited to be here to share some thoughts around a career in tech. My name is Joanna Udo. I currently work for Spectrum Health, now formerly and temporarily known as BHSH, as there has been a combination of 2 hospitals. And I work as the manager for end user technology services. And you're probably like, what does that even mean? But really what it means is that I have a team of people that report directly to me. And our job is to make sure that all of Spectrum Health has the technology that they need to do their jobs. And when we say end user, devices, so we're talking laptop, printers, scanners, tablets, cell phones. My team is responsible for buying them, managing them, seeing what that experience is like with the customers, and our customers are really nurses and doctors and everybody that works at Spectrum Health. So we make sure we have enough of those on hand so that we can give them out to projects, we can give them out when a new employee is hired. We make sure that it works with all of the other technologies, because that is just one side of technology. There's a lot of other things. Making sure that it works for the other technologies, setting the standards for the organization as to what should be used. So like iPhones are the only cell phones allowed, or a Lenovo laptop is the only laptop allowed. And so my team kind of sets those standards. I have worked for Spectrum Health for 11 years. I started this job while I was in college. Not this particular job, I've had several IT jobs, but I started with the organization when I was still in college, and and I'm still here. So we can dive in later. Oh, a day in my life, a day in the life of an IT manager is really around meetings. So we live in a remote world right now. I don't go on site. So I am in a lot of meetings like this one. So this is actually a day in my life. I'm sitting, I'm having conversations, I'm consulting with employees, I'm consulting with other leaders to understand what their needs are, what projects are coming up, what my budget is, or if I went over budget, how can I bring it down? So my entire job actually just revolves around talking and occasionally filling out spreadsheets and approving rights. So every time somebody on my team needs access to something, I need to approve those, or anytime we're making purchases, I need to approve the payment for it. And so, yeah, I sit on a computer, talk, click buttons, and that's a day in my life.
All right. Thank you, Joanna. Stephanie, I think, you're going to have a unique perspective, in these tech conversations. So why don't you start with the same question, introduce yourself, company, and kind of your day in the life and what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Stephanie Miracle. Currently I work at OST. We're a tech consultancy in downtown Grand Rapids, and we've got a couple of locations in Detroit and Minneapolis, but our reach is kind of across the globe. Well, across mostly the US. We do have a client in London, but mostly basically what we do at OST is we our consultancy. So anytime a business needs any sort of technical anything, whether it be a software solution like a mobile application or just redoing their network or anything like that, we can help them. So my role at the company is a technical recruiter. So I interview candidates, try to find them the right fit in the organization. With today's market, it's really tough because, a lot of companies are hiring all across the US now, not just in their locations where they're located. And so there's a lot of competition and finding people to put in these jobs. So what my job looks like today was a lot different than what our job looked like a few years ago, where, before we would post a position and we get hundreds of applicants and we'd have to sift through all these resumes and try to figure out who we wanted to interview. And these days we post a position and we get 0 applicants. And so now my job is going out and kind of creeping on people's LinkedIn profiles and trying to find people. So kind of become more of an investigator of learning a lot about all of the different tech roles within the industry or within OST specifically, and then trying to find them. And it kind of has a sales aspect too, and that now you're trying to, a lot of them are happy where they are or have other options in front of them. So really trying to let them know why coming to our organization is a good fit for them and what we can do for them on our end. So a lot of, you'll hear the word sourcing from me. So sourcing is that aspect of going out and finding candidates. I do a lot of interviews. I do a lot of intake calls. So that's meeting with hiring managers across the organization and learning about their roles. And building relationships with them, really. One of the fun things about my role that I absolutely love is that you get to build relationships with everybody at the organization, both candidates coming in, managers who are leading these people, and you really get your hands in every different piece of the organization. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I do on a day-to-day. I'm doing those interviews, sourcing. We do also attend job fairs. So one of the things I also love about my job is that, the ability to travel across the US to either our locations or different career fairs, conferences, things like that. And yeah, just trying to research new ways and creative ways to be a part of or find these people to fill our roles. On top of that, on the talent team, which I sit where I sit at OST, we're also responsible for making sure that people are happy in their jobs. So and making sure that our culture is kind of making its way to those who are remote too. So doing fun things, making sure that we're celebrating the victories of our employees as they complete certifications and they get married and all of those things. So I'm trying to keep our people happy and keep them coming in the door. And yeah, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Stephanie. And
Yeah.
if you're taking notes in the classroom, what's kind of cool so far, so there's a trend. We're talking about the tech sector, the IT sector, and you're already seeing, like, you have Joanna working in an enterprise, a large enterprise, working with the hardware, managing teams. Stephanie's working in the tech area, but she's a recruiter. She's working at the people, bringing in the people to the teams. Our third panelist today is Roger. He's going to give you he's in the trenches. Roger is a software developer, and he's going to talk a little bit about his role. Roger?
Yeah, my name is Roger. I work at a company called MindSpring as an augmented and virtual reality software developer. And my job is less so focused on building the actual AR or VR experiences, but actually building the engine that builds those experiences. My job also partially overlaps with game development, which is really nice. Dealing with rendering software and crazy code bases for physics programming and things like that. But yeah, I mean, even though this sounds pretty daunting, it's pretty easy, I wake up in the morning, I grab a cup of coffee, I open up my laptop or my desktop computer, or whichever other computer it is I want to work on that day. Always have to have multiples. And then I basically just sit down and get a couple tasks from the board and go to town at it. Yeah, a lot of the clients that we that my company currently works for, like Daimler Chrysler, GE Aviation, University of Wisconsin, and then there's all these companies that like kind of come together and they're like, hey, we want like a web-based application for us to build like training simulations and stuff for say that if you want to give somebody like a virtual tour of a company, you can go to this place and you can scan it like with an iPad Pro in particular, or one of those I think they're called like a Matterport scanner. And they go in, like they get the architecture, and it's kind of like a 3D, like those VR camera things. And you can like specifically place things around the room and then have multiple people like walking around with you, and build out different things that are just kind of like floating in space. But yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. I got to this position originally from my education at Grand Circus, where I studied front end development, just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Angular, stuff like that. And then over time, I started wanting something a little bit more challenging, I guess. So I started learning like C# with Unity, the game engine, Unreal Engine, React, it's like 3JS, and a lot of these things they're so accessible and like they're actually free. Basically everything just kind of came together, and that's where I'm at now.
All right. And this kind of leads into my next question. So I'm going to start with you, then we'll go in reverse order. Go Roger, Stephanie, Joanna. So you mentioned about, starting at Grand Circus. For the students that don't know, it's Grand Circus is a coding boot camp. It's where you learn how to code in a relatively condensed, quick, immersive style. But that leads me to this question about, and I know Roger for many years too, so I kind of know his journey. But when it comes to the world of IT, specifically coding, what are some ways educationally, skill learning, that you can get to from point A, like I want to work in this industry, to point C, which is where you're at now, Roger, at the exciting career? You talk through the things you did. So you had a kind of a non-traditional path where you've learned a lot on your own. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I started programming when I was about 14 years old. I'm 31 years old now. I originally just wanted to do websites for like smaller businesses, and then I don't know why, but I jumped like straight into game development and started learning like C# and all these like advanced things. And I'm like, my 14-year-old brain just wants to go outside and like drive the dirt bike around for a while. I don't want to sit here and do the work. So I put that aside until I was about 18. And then I pursued a music career for some years, and I felt like I like forgot everything. So I started just self-learning again. I was using I can't remember the guy's name, but it was a Unity or a Udemy course on all things dealing with front-end development. So like lots of videos on YouTube. There's so many free resources out there just to learn things from nowadays. And then I wanted to kind of put myself to the test to see if I actually remembered anything, because I felt like I was just kind of spinning my wheels for years, or for a year, I guess. So that's when I joined Grand Circus, was to get like my certification, kind of hone my skills, put myself into a situation where I knew that I had to learn to actually use all the things that I've already learned. Then from there, it's been a lot more videos and just experimenting. And it seems like the path to programming is you can watch a million tutorials on something, but until you just dive into it and get really frustrated for a couple of hours, and then you're like, oh, something just snapped, like it clicks now. And it's like this slow buildup of all those things where it becomes second nature, and then you can just start writing things out, and it, things like start moving around on the screen or looking like things. So yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks. Hey,
Mhm.
Stephanie, talk about your journey. How did you end up as a technical recruiter? I mean, I don't think you probably grew up, I want to be a technical recruiter when you were in high school. I don't know, maybe you did, but how'd you
Yeah.
end up there?
I don't think any recruiter does that. Honestly, I
Yes.
didn't know recruiting was a thing until I had already had a job somewhere else and just kind of fell into it. When you're in middle school, high school, you don't hear about people saying like recruiting is a great career trajectory. Like you just don't hear about that. So I like to say that my background is, I guess, a little unorthodox in how you would take a way to get to recruiting, but I don't think there is a right way. There's so many different skills and different paths that you could take to get to it if it's something that you wanted to do. So I will share my screen a little bit here. Maybe not that one. Let's see. Okay, can you see this here? This says my background.
I don't think I see it yet. Does
I
anybody
see
see it?
it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, does it have Jurassic World on there?
Yes.
Is that the right screen? Okay, you're not
Yep.
seeing my other stuff. Okay, awesome. So this is the year I started recruiting officially was in 2015. I tried to look up some relevant things that happened in 2015, and apparently it was a really boring year. So Jurassic World came out, and then Hello by Adele, which I thought came out like 2 years ago, but apparently it was 2015. So that's what was happening. And that's when I started recruiting. I started as an associate recruiter. At a manufacturing company. Before that, I worked for a credit union. So I went to college and I actually studied psychology, thinking that I wanted to go into school counseling. And then I didn't finish my degree right away. Actually, I had a few classes left. And so I moved and started working at a credit union as a teller. And then as I worked there. This is me and my team. But my last day at the credit union actually was Halloween, and I did my exit interview with our CEO dressed as a starfish. That's me there. This is us being Finding Nemo. So yeah, I started as a teller. I worked over into our contact center and really just loved learning about everything about the credit union. I love to learn about the organization I'm working for, so that when people come to me with questions, I can answer them. So eventually, I moved into our training department, and I did training and development for 2 years there. And so I was writing our training materials and training all of our employees. And a piece of that was new employee orientation, which is a little piece of recruiting too. So that's kind of where I started getting my feet into it and learned more about HR. My manager at the time was the vice president of human resources at the credit union, and it was a one-person HR team there. And she's the one who is Dory she's the jellyfish back here. She instilled in me this love for HR. She was such a great manager and gave me all these opportunities and saw some things in me that I wasn't sure that I wanted to do. And so I became an HR specialist there. I interviewed for part-time tellers as the only job that we had open there. And I also did their benefit things and anything that came up HR related, I assisted with. And I realized I just loved HR. I made $13 an hour there, which for my family wasn't cutting it. And so I knew I needed to go in another direction. And I saw a position pop up for an associate recruiter at a manufacturing company. Recruiting did not sound fun to me. I am not salesy. I'm actually, believe it or not, an introvert. I love to stick with myself, and the idea of working with people every day kind of gave me anxiety, but I applied for the job and I got an offer and I decided to take it. And it was one of the best decisions. When I did my interview there, I interviewed with the director of talent management, and they told me like recruiting is a stepping stone to other areas of HR. A lot of people come into recruiting and they go other places. And I did it there for 5 years. And I have always said like I could see myself recruiting forever because I just love it. So this was me, my first day at DART, which is a manufacturing company. That was my very first office, looked very fancy, but I absolutely loved it there. And that was kind of the path that I took. So in terms of the tech recruiting piece, I moved over to OST. I actually worked with my husband at DART eventually, and my husband came over to OST first. And so we've worked at 2 places together now, but the tech industry is is, if you're not a techie person like myself, very scary. When I hear Roger talk about C# and React, if you would have talked to me a year ago, I would have thought he was talking a foreign language. But I, again, love to learn. And so the learning capacity that I took to get to where I am in the tech field, of being able to talk to people like Roger, who are a software developer, who I'm trying to say, like, here's why you want to be a software developer at OST. You need how to learn to know that language too. And so I just recently completed a tech recruitment certification. They have those. So it teaches you about the very basics of front-end development, back-end development, DevOps, and then also strategies of how to be a recruiter in that field and the best way to attract candidates in those fields and kind of the science behind it. I also am just fascinated by software development. I didn't realize that until I came over to OST. So I have my husband's one of our lead developers, and then I have a 9-year-old son who, very much like Roger, just picked up a book and started like learning how to develop things. So I'm learning from my 9-year-old son how to code right now. So I'm picking up development a little bit. So in terms of where you can go with it, you can really go wherever you want to go. I mean, you can go in HR, or, in just me talking and learning from all of the managers that I work with in the tech space. I work with network engineers, I work with software developers, I work with designers, and finding out like, okay, maybe I want to go in this area, and you have those networks built to be able to, know people and learn from people. And I think, I know you didn't ask for my advice, but honestly, I think with any position, and I'm sure John will attest to this, like, you hear the word networking, that's getting to know people that aren't just in your direct circle, like not just your family and friends and your coworkers, but people working elsewhere. Like, what can you learn from those people? And in the world of recruiting, you do that all the time with, the people in your organization, but also like other people in Grand Rapids. I'm on a team with John of like, we get together with other recruiters of like, what are you guys doing? Like, what can we do here that other people are doing? How can we learn from each other? And so there's so many different ways to learn, and there's not one right answer, but if it's something that you want to do, there's a lot of different paths to take to get there. So, it's not a direct answer to your question, but hopefully that helps.
Well, the question really was about a journey, and that's what journeys are, right? I mean, both for you and Roger so far, it's like you start one way, you end up pivoting to another way, and sometimes you're very opportunistic. And then you get to where you want. But one thing we want to hopefully excite you about the students is the opportunities in information technology. They're limitless. And so we're going to hear from Joanna right now about her journey to Spectrum right out of college. And Joanna?
So in one sense, I have like a really direct career path. I went to college and I landed my first dream job, and here we are. But in reality, I grew up wanting to be a doctor. My mother is a nurse. She's a retired nurse now. And I was groomed to go to med school. I had all of the med related toys. I can tell you all kinds of diseases and problems, because I've read a lot of those books. But when it actually came time to go to college, and I was learning more about like what it really meant, because when your parents are prepping you for med school or for any career path, they're not necessarily talking about like the college experience of it. And so when it came time to go to college, and I realized this was like a 12-year commitment before I can even do anything, I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not cut out for this. And that's when we did like a college tour, and we went to Davenport University, met with an advisor. She was really great. And we just talked about like possible careers and things. She gives us this catalog, undergraduate catalog. And I literally just flip over. I flip over to one of those pages, and there was computer networking, and I was so fascinated by it. And I was like, I think this is gonna be it. And my parents were like, my mother was basically freaked out, like, what? This is not what we signed up for. It has nothing to do with healthcare. I mean, I get it, you don't want to be a doctor, but what does this even mean? And the advisor was really great, and was trying to tell my parents, it's okay. She can switch her major later if she finds out it's not something that she wants to do. And I was just like, no, I think I want to do it. My mother was just like, okay, cool, whatever. So that's how I enrolled in a computer networking program. I was always good with computers. I use computers a lot. I can fix just about anything, radio, anything that's actually plugs to the wall. I can take apart and put them back together. And so like, but it was those skills that my mom was always so worried about, because it's like, oh my God, if you take apart one more thing in this house, we're gonna have trouble. But I didn't know, I didn't know that could even be a job, right? I knew it was something I did for fun, but I had no idea people got paid to do things like that. So my exposure, enrolling in this program, they had different classes that teach. So it's not just, so computer networking is really kind of how your internet works when you go to Google and you're able to connect to all of these different things, or with Zoom and all of that. It's really the back end connection of how information is transferred across all of these different channels. But when you go for a bachelor's degree in computer networking, you're not just learning that, you're learning like a lot of different things. And one of them was like web development. I learned how to take computers apart and build computers. And that's where I was like, oh my God, there's just like, I didn't even know this was a job. I didn't know you could do any of those things. And I decided I wanted to be a web developer. So that was my dream job. I wanted to be a web developer, build websites. And I had an internship with a small web development company. Loved it. I was like, man, I could do this the rest of my life. And I got hired part-time. And then I started doing it a little bit more. I think I did it for 9 months. And I was like, oof, I think I need a new career. Because I do not think that I'm also cut out to code all the time. That was not me. I am more like, I'm a creative person. I like the process of building something from scratch. And kind of bringing it to life. So I think that was the excitement of a website to me, was that I could take something that customers wanted and turn it into this beautiful page that they really love, and it serves their need and stuff like that. But after you've done it like 19 times, it's kind of like, okay, that's not my thing. There are some people that really enjoy it, but I need to like move on and try something else. And so that's when one of my other classes came up, and it was the taking stuff apart class. And I was like, hey, taking computers apart, that's it. That's the dream right there. I've been doing this since I was a kid, and I can get paid doing this. I'm sold. That's my dream job. So that's how I started a contract at Spectrum Health. And so basically temporary employment when I believe that was my sophomore year, so second year or maybe early junior year. There was a contract. Actually, I'll backtrack. That was my second role. I did one other contract before that we're not going to talk about with them. And then I moved into this one, and backtrack again. Actually, I did an internship at St. Mary's, which is now Mercy Health. And it was solely focused on that desktop support. And part of what they used to do was all of the computers that were old for the hospital and they didn't want to use it anymore, you can take it apart. They would resell it to employees at a very, very low cost. And so when I started the internship, my job was to like clean up those computers, make sure there is no data from the hospital on it. So wipe the hard drive or image it, check the RAM, make sure it runs correctly. So it was a lot of taking things apart. So that's actually when I decided that was my dream job, because I did like hundreds of those computers. So it's like, yes, I love it. So then I got a contract to Spectrum Health to put in new computers in a brand new building that just built. So it was kind of the same thing, putting the computers together, putting the software that was needed on cabling and all that stuff. And that was my dream job. But I would say I have had so many dream jobs, and I argue that there isn't one dream job, and you continue to evolve and you have different desires. And so I did that. And then later on, I moved in and I did another, I was a systems analyst working on a team that focused on enterprise monitoring. Enterprise monitoring is really all of the technologies that we have in the hospital, we do need to kind of keep tabs on them, so that we know when they're going down. If there's been any issues, the wrong person is logged in and things like that, and we kind of monitor that and track them and fix any issues that may come up. So I did that for a little bit. And then I've since moved into probably 4 other roles that we don't have the time to talk about. But the most beautiful thing about being in tech has been to me that there's so many options, right? Like you can be anything that you want to be. And so whatever your skill sets are, whatever you enjoy doing, there is probably a job in tech for you that is a good fit. Some of those jobs may have different titles that you don't even know today. Some job titles may not necessarily be what they are, and may have other components to it. And so it's really just figuring out what it is that you already love, and then finding which of those things matches like a tech career. Like every single job I've had in tech, I didn't even know existed. Like I had no idea. I've always just been already there, started doing it, and then it was there, or seen other people have it when I was already in the organization. Somebody recommended me for it. Or I've also had roles created specifically for me that didn't exist either. So I say all of that to say there is something for everyone.
Very cool. I like that class you must have taken, that putting things back together class or whatever you described at Davenport. So, all right. So here's $1 million question. Now, hopefully it's $1 million question someday, but this came up quite a bit during our other conversation. So if you're students out there, you might be thinking about this if you haven't already put it in the Q&A. Talk about the salary range for in your particular where you're working now, and we just need a range, kind of where you start, where somebody could start in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. What are some of the earning potentials? So again, I'll do the reverse thing and start with Joanna first. So just, I know we talked about this before everybody logged on.
Yeah, I would say for my role, I think the range is pretty wide. I would say that it probably starts somewhere around 90,000 and probably maxes out at like 160,000 or so. But for you to get to like a manager role, you're looking at potentially 5 to 10 years of experience to get there. And that kind of differs based on if it's a smaller organization, a really big organization, or a mid-sized organization. But as far as like entry level role, I would say, it's anywhere from $12 an hour to probably as high as $30 an hour, again, depending on where you fit in terms of experiences and things like that. And internships will probably follow some of that model as well. But when I started in my first contract role, my internship was unpaid. So the internship I did for Mercy Health was unpaid, but my first contract role was only $10 an hour. But that was a billion years ago.
Well, that's helpful. I mean, it shows you like you do have to start somewhere. Internships are where you start. That could be whatever, 10 to 20 to $30 an hour as an intern. But then once you get that 5 years experience, earning potential increases pretty dramatically. Hey, Roger, talk about your experience from compensation or from, and you don't have to specifically to yourself, but from what you know about other software developers that you worked with.
Okay. Yeah. So typically, when I first started, I made about $25 an hour, and that seemed to be a pretty common rate around Grand Rapids. So about like 3 years or so, I sort of like hovered around that area of pay. I could have went elsewhere and got more, but I sort of liked what I was doing at the time. But I mean, I've seen a lot of people's ranges also very like dramatically change. Like just as you had said, once you actually hit about I'd say about 3 years in software development. Then you're starting to look at the range between like 70,000 to 100,000 and above. I think that the most that I've ever made so far was around like 84,000 ish. But that was also doing like contracting and stuff on the side. But yeah, usually it's between like 25 to like 50 an hour, typically.
All right. Hey, Stephanie, what's the life in the recruiters, from a career standpoint and an earnings potential as a technical recruiter?
Yeah. And I can say like, and this is probably true for any job, that since COVID, a lot of people I mentioned are working remotely. So depending on where you're located, you can make a lot more on the West Coast, but I know people are chasing careers to make more money, and we're finding statistically like they're coming back because the culture is not so great and they want to work in house. So like, don't be enticed by necessarily moving outside of Michigan for money necessarily, but so that's my little caveat. But I can say like for recruiting, you can start anywhere. I was looking at actually our like market compensation over here this morning. You can start anywhere around 55,000 for an associate recruiter. It could be less. That's kind of like if you do have a little bit of experience. So you could probably expect a little less than that if you're coming out like just not having any experience. And then probably same as Roger, you can make up to 110,000 or more if you're like a lead or specializing in executive recruiting for like higher level positions too. So yeah, I would say probably a little bit similar to Roger's.
All right. Hey,
Cool.
Sadie, do we have any questions coming in through the Q&A?
We do not yet. There's just a couple of things in the chat, but no questions yet.
Okay. So I encourage you, ask these questions either in the chat or the Q&A if you have any, because I have a few more questions. So this is one thing that I think I'm thinking of. I'll start with Stephanie on this one again. We talk, you all have like technical skills. Joanna takes things apart, puts them back together. Roger's a developer. Stephanie is working in the HR skill set area. But what are some like soft skills or power skills that you see as critical for career success? So these are things beyond like the technical requirements of a job. What are some of these soft skills that you feel like are equally as important, maybe more so as the technical parts of the job? Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say the ability to work with people and build relationships with people. So, a friendly attitude. If you're a recruiter and you're talking to somebody and you're not a nice person, they're probably not going to want to work at your company. So, and the ability to follow up with people and give them a good experience in that interview process. You're the face of the company to them and you're their first impression. So just being friendly and welcoming to them. Organization, and I don't know if this is necessarily a soft skill, but like, I guess the ability to be flexible in the recruiting world. We have maybe we really need a software developer for a project right now and we need them yesterday. And so you're spending your whole day doing that. And then the next day they're like, oh, we don't need that person anymore, but we need 5 project managers, so you're the ability to kind of switch off and on and to be flexible in that. Creativity is huge. Especially now, just being able to figure out, I can kind of bounce off of Joanna, she mentioned like you can, no matter what your skill set, you can find a career in tech. And that's absolutely true. So I can talk to somebody, we have people reach out sometimes that they're interested in a career at OST, but they don't know where they'd fit. And we don't know where they'd fit looking at their resume. So we have a conversation with them and find out, what do you like? What do you like to do? What do you want to be doing? What skills do you have? And we have a need for project managers who maybe don't need any experience, but you just need to have the ability to lead a team and kind of take charge and be organized. And so that like creative mindset of knowing kind of where to plug people into a puzzle that doesn't have like a guide to go off of, and just a creative way to find, like, okay, this isn't working. We're not finding candidates here. What else can we do that's outside of the box? And I think just genuinely caring for people, when you're bringing people into an organization and it's your job to kind of help to make sure that the managers are doing their job to making sure these people are happy and help making sure that they want to stay here. So having those conversations and wanting them to be happy in their roles and to find a good fit for them. So leadership is great too. As you're having conversations with these people who are a little higher up in the organization, being able to be confident in those conversations. A lot of times, if you're a manager and you know that you need a software developer on your team and your team's working extra hard because they don't have that person in that spot right now, and they're coming to me saying, why don't we have it? Why don't we have it? Having the confidence to say like, okay, we're doing our best, but like, here's what we're running into. Here's what we're seeing in the market. Like, here's what we can do differently, and to come to them with ideas of maybe we can be a little bit more flexible in our requirements, or maybe we can coach them in this and we don't really need them to have 5 years of experience in React or whatever language it is. So just being confident and able to kind of consult with the managers that you're working with too. Those are just a few. Yeah.
All right. Hey, Roger, I want you to kind of blow up the stereotype of software developers as kind of introverts working, on their desk with their hoods on and not talking to anybody else. So I know there's soft skills needed to be successful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Software development these days it's definitely not somebody sitting down in the basement with a ton of screens all over the place and just going to town on code. It's like it's more so it's a lot of meetings, talk to a lot of clients, talk to your bosses, especially. It's always a very collaborative experience in most places, unless you're like working by yourself. Like at my place, I probably can't go more than like 3 or 4 hours without somebody messaging me asking to assist them with a problem, or asking me about like some code that I put into an application that they didn't understand. Mostly things like that. But pretty much gone are the days where, back in the 90s, everybody had like the big glasses and drank tons of Mountain Dew and programmed. So,
All right.
for
Hey,
better.
Joanna. All right. Joanna, how about you from a soft skills standpoint? I know you're a master networker. So
So I wanted to piggyback off of Stephanie's talking about the switching, or we call that context switching. And that is something that I think everybody in tech needs, is basically we jump from one thing to another all the time. So in a large organization like ours, maybe this is different with smaller organization, but in large organizations where we have lots of people, so for example, our IT department has over 1,000 people, right? There are a lot of people working on different services, different products, different solutions, and we're constantly churning out these things that is being asked of us, but the organizational strategy changes, right? Something changes. There is the pandemic. Well, pandemic is just one thing that happened now, but in healthcare, there's a lot of different things that's going to happen that the work you were doing yesterday is no longer necessary today, and you have to like scrap it, move on to something else, or you're working on 3 different things at the same time. So it's not that it's getting scrapped, it's just like the 3 very drastic different things. So you're jumping from that to that to that, going to this meeting, talking about this, switching that hat. So the ability to kind of juggle that is really important to me as a hiring manager. And then the ability to really care about people. One of the things that my team is responsible for is end user experience. So how are people interacting with our technology? For you to truly understand that, you need to really listen. You need to observe how that technology is being used, and then kind of capture the experience that you observe, that you listen to, and then see what we can do to improve it. Right? So this isn't anything technical. This is you actually paying attention to what the customer is saying to you, and not just jumping off to close the ticket, because your ticket number is going to be higher if you just close it and move on. The other skill I look for is the ability to anticipate the needs of someone before they do, come up with that need. So basically being more proactive than reactive. And in IT, a lot of us tend to be on the reactive side. So we wait for a ticket to come in because something broke to fix it. Whereas if we, again, it comes back to paying attention. So like attention to detail, I guess is what this really comes down to. If we had paid some more attention to detail, planned for different things, we could have seen that coming and probably fixed that issue before it became an issue. And then the other thing that I look for is communication skills. In my team and in my role, I like to say this, I have to communicate up, down, and sideways. And what that means is I'm communicating to people that sit higher than me. So our leadership teams, I am communicating to people that directly report to me. I am then communicating with my peers, which would be other leaders. And in other cases, in extreme cases, there's even more people outside of that. But how you communicate with the senior leadership team is going to be completely different than how you communicate with a technology, like a technical person, for example, or your direct reports. And so you have to be able to understand who your audience is, who you're talking to, and make sure that you're tailoring the information you're sharing to those people, because otherwise we're just talking way above people or way below people, and neither of those is a good experience. I hope that covers it.
Yeah, very good. We did see a question came in. It's kind of interesting. I don't see it there now, but let's say
it moved to the answered column,
okay,
John, because yeah.
All right, this is like this is you go back in the Wayback Machine a little bit in your life, like as a middle school student. When you're in middle school, if you had to like think about what you're learning now, like say you're in middle school and you're hearing these tech experts, what would you done differently? What can a middle school student do to start thinking about career and technology? I mean, I know middle school students look at sports, or like Joanna mentioned, medicine. Maybe their parents are talking about going into as a doctor or maybe a lawyer. What can you do in tech as a middle school student? And this will be a jump ball. So whoever wants to.
So I'm homeschooled. What age is middle school?
I would say when I define it, what's that, 4th through 7th grade, something in that area?
Okay. I still don't know what that is.
Like
because
11
I
to
don't understand
14?
grades.
Right.
11-ish to 14.
Okay, 11-ish.
11 to
That's my guess.
14.
I would say that what they can do is starting to just have kind of a curiosity mindset. And this is what I think really worked well for me, was just that curiosity, right? Taking things apart wasn't necessarily because I enjoyed taking things apart like that. It was more so that I was curious about what was happening inside those things, right? So you're asking questions, you are looking at how things work beyond the surface level. So your parents got you that Xbox, and it was the hottest gift that Christmas season, but beyond playing that game, how does the Xbox actually work? And you start looking at that and paying attention. In other cases, just playing the Xbox, games on the Xbox, you can learn as well, because we do need people that test some of the technologies to make sure that they work. Again, coming back to end user experience, there is a whole group of people that are also playing that game to see how it feels. Does it do what we thought it was doing? So you, as a middle school student, can also start doing that, right? As you're using this technology, because all of us are using technology today. Technology isn't something that is hard to find. In my day, like, it wasn't that common, but everything is kind of connected to technology now. And so as you're using that technology, what problem are you seeing, right? So sometimes you're using Snapchat or whatever school does this, TikTok, and you're like, it would be really cool if you could do this to the video, like if you could add this type of filter, or if this button was to the left side. You can't necessarily change it because you don't own TikTok, but you can submit a request to TikTok and say, hey, I think that this would be really cool to change this to this. You never know they may make that change. But that curiosity mindset is really what you're going to need in tech. And I specifically focused on that instead of telling you what coding class to take in, because I know there's going to be others that are going to tell you those.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I love that curiosity mindset. Stephanie or Roger, do you guys want to have any chime in on?
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that I've been seeing pop up quite often are kind of extracurricular STEM classes. There was actually a company that I had contracted for a little while called the Loop Coding Center. And primarily what they do is that they'll send instructors out to these different schools, mostly around Grand Rapids, from what I know of. And we would teach students how to do web development or like game development, like more simplistic things. But yeah, like those classes have been very, very useful for some students. I think that kind of like one of the hard parts of trying to get someone in middle school kind of career ready. Sort of the same thing like what I'd said earlier about, when I was 14, it was like I wanted to build video games, but I just didn't want to put in the work for it. At least not to the level that I needed to to like actually understand that stuff. But yeah, just like what John said in the chat, just go ahead and ask questions and tinker, build, find something that interests you. Because yeah, once you get bored, like that's pretty much it. You'll be like, oh, that's too much work for the payoff. But with technology being in everything nowadays, learning how to program and even just like simple like web development stuff, just learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it really opens up the door. And it's not so much like learning a specific skill set, but just learning a skill set in general. Because once you get the idea of how like flow works, like kind of the way how information kind of flows through an actual program, everything else is relatively easy, so.
Great. Stephanie?
Yeah, I think, and I'll speak not from the recruiting side, but from the software developer side too, because I do have some experience in that with my own family. So like, I think just understanding that you're in middle school and you have some adults who are 30 years in their 30s talking to you about their careers right now, but like you're never too young. So like, even if you're in middle school, don't think like, oh, I'm too young to do this. Yeah. I have a 9-year-old son who loves software development, and there's so many resources out there of like kids coding and learning online, and use that screen time that you have instead of watching TV and playing video games. Like it's just as fun sometimes to learn how to code. My son, I don't know how many of you have played the game Wordle, but he created his own Wordle game that he calls Knerdle, and my husband helped him to get it online, and we share it with our family. And through that, he's learning like, oh, there's a bug I need to fix. Like it's not working. They're wanting to have the screen be green instead of blue. So changing that. So he's learning all of those skills of, running into the bugs that you'll run into, the things that need to be fixed, features that you can add. So it's so fun too. So just doing that in your free time. And, as a recruiter, when we're looking for people, you'll hear when you get out of college, people are looking for people with experience. And sometimes that experience is not necessarily something you get from a job, but just the interest that you have, and showing that like you've done some things that you've found some ways to learn about it on your own too, as a hobby. So yeah, I would share that. And then also ask your teachers if they want to partner. There are lots of companies around West Michigan. OST is one of them that loves to have students come in, and our developers love to talk to them and work with them. So we'd be happy to host and, reach out to any of those companies. And, there's a lot of different organizations that are willing to step in and kind of work with you and help you to learn some of those things too.
Yeah, if anybody wants to, that the teachers that are on the phone call want to reach out, you can reach out to me or to Samantha on this afterwards, and we can share like Stephanie's contact information if you'd like to take her up on her offer to visit OST. Amazing space and company. So got time for one more question. And I'm going to frame it like this is where you get a chance for your crystal ball. So it looking like a 5 to 10 year forecast within information technology and technology. I know it changes quite often, but like, where do you see this industry being in, let's say, 5 to 10 years from now? This will be our last question, and you can also wrap up with any other words of wisdom. But Stephanie, why don't you start? I know it's kind of like put you on the spot.
I have no
here.
idea.
I know. Well, that's a good answer, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't have told you 2 years ago with the pandemic that we would be where we are now. Like, companies are required to change based on what's going on in the world so quickly. And tech is a huge piece of that. One example is one of our clients that we work with is Meijer. I'm sure we've all been to Meijer in West Michigan, and Meijer a few years ago did pickup orders, but it wasn't very common. It wasn't like a huge priority for them. And then the pandemic hit and people didn't want to go into the grocery store because it was scary because the germs, like people weren't coming inside. So then they had to really quickly flip and say like, we need a better process for this. And so then they needed people in tech to come in and help them to build out these systems and to make it more efficient. And within a few months, they turned it around and their whole process changed. So lots of things can cause tech to change, and it is changing. It's different, today than it was a few months ago, even in some areas. So it's hard to predict, but I think that's what's exciting about it, is that you're always learning. There's always opportunities to just keep developing in your skills and learning the latest and greatest. And it impacts all other different industries too. Everybody uses tech across the world. And I think that's super exciting. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, in retrospect, that was kind of a dumb question, because it's so like impossible to predict what.
No dumb questions.
Yeah, what's happening. Roger, what do you think? And you could take this any way you want, like advice for, the students that are on there, or where do you see the industry going? You're kind of on the cutting edge anyway with AR, and VR. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that probably within like 5 to 10 years, I think that the focus for students and just like, anybody coming out of school will probably have to have some kind of experience programming, even today with like all the pushes and the just like the treasure trove of knowledge on the internet, there's still a lot of positions that remain unfilled. And as we just advance, like, as our human race advances in technology, the need for good engineers is just going to go up and up. And, it again, it's hard to really predict exactly where it's going to go. But in the job sense, I think that they're going to be, it's going to be easier than ever to actually get newer people in the door of these bigger companies. And if you start now, like start young, like while you have a lot of time, aside from school, you could be sitting at somewhere like making just a ton of money. You could be working on the next like Twitter or Snapchat or whichever. So that's one of the things that I sort of wish that I would have done when I was in school, was actually like feel a little bit more confident about working with other people. And I think that having more time definitely would have changed it. But yeah, like as far as where tech is going, hard to say, but I know that there's going to be a lot of jobs.
All right, thanks. And Joanna, you get to kind of wrap things up. I know we have a minute or so left. So your words of wisdom, future looking.
So future looking, I would say we already have a lot of positions that are unfilled today. So we already have more technology than we have people to do the job. And that trend is going to continue as we adapt more and more technologies. And so we need as many bodies as we possibly can in tech as at the same time as, trying to fill all the other roles that exist out there. That's not just in tech, because we still need all the other things. But the thing I see as far as technology goes, which is already in development and would just get more mature over the next few years, personalization is a big deal. And so regardless of what type of technology it is, it's no longer like super generic. We have so much data now because we've been doing all this technology stuff for a while, and we've been actively using it, and we've collected so much data. And now we're using that data to be more informed, learn more about you. I can probably, if I have enough time on my hands, I can probably tell you exactly the kind of person you are based on your technology habits. And that's data that we already have today. So now we're in the space of taking this data and building things around it, right? Building things that solve problems for very, very specific people. And so data analytics is the big thing. It has been a big thing for a while, but it is going to continue to mature and is going to continue to advance and require more people to assist with that. But also things like your metaverse. I don't know if you're all aware of it. I'm kind of behind as it works, but it's really this concept with pandemic really pushing this. I mean, we've been doing this has been in the works for a minute. But with the pandemic and everything, is this whole idea of being together without being together, right? And kind of removing that barrier of just a Zoom call, but really having that interaction with people. So the work that Roger is doing around AR, VR, and XR, and whatever all the other names are for it, is going to mature a lot more, but it's no longer just going to be a game. In most cases, when we think of, and I know I'm going to go over here, but I'm going to try to wrap it up real quick. But in most cases, we're talking virtual reality, we're thinking games. But as this technology advances, right, this is a doctor's appointment that is now far more interactive. This is a restaurant service that is more interactive. This is your Meijer checkout that is more interactive. And so those are some of the things that I see continuing to advance. And cybersecurity is always going to be a big deal, because the more things we put on the internet, the more things we connect to technology, the more things we need to keep secure from the bad people. And there's probably like two more, but I will pause there.
All right. Well, I think we're at our time limit. I want to thank everybody, the teachers who brought their classrooms in, the students, and especially our career guides, Stephanie, Roger, and Joanna. Appreciate you taking your time out. And hopefully we can have these discussions that, we'll continue to have these discussions with the schools and work closely with the educators so we can create these pathways into IT. So with that said, thanks everyone.